Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features Marvel Comics Presents number 73 from 1991, and this is the second part of the Weapon X serial by Barry Windsor-Smith. So the cover here featuring Logan in a flotation tank, and he is riddled with tubes and pins and wires and unconscious with claws extended, double lit, with this sickly green lighting and also this blood red lighting on his back. So a striking cover, but I feel that perhaps Windsor-Smith wouldn't have included the claws except to indicate on this cover that this is indeed Wolverine, because otherwise not exactly recognizable, because he's naked and in a position that we don't normally associate with him, as he's undergoing medical experimentation. Specifically, this is the story that reveals how he got his adamantium skeleton. And let's open it up to the first page. So every one of these chapters of the story has 8 pages. This is here in the credits indicated as chapter 1 because the previous issue of Marvel Comics Presents contains the prologue. So the chapter 1 here is summarized as being about Logan, who has been taken captive by a group of mysterious men. Barry Windsor-Smith responsible for every aspect of this: writing, penciling, inking, coloring, and co-lettering the work. Jim Novak only supplying the lettering in the captions and speech balloons. So let's take a look at our first panel here, which is a vertical establishing shot of Logan walking out from this bar with the advertisements there in the background, the level of detail that Windsor-Smith is working in here. We've got Budweiser, Miller, Wild Turkey advertised outside the bar. We've got a truck there. We've got Wolverine's sports buggy here that he's walking towards. And then look at the way that he's indicated the tracks of various vehicles in the snow, because of course the setting here is somewhere in Canada, in Ontario. And Wolverine, we've seen, actually I should call him Logan because he hasn't got his Wolverine identity just yet. So Logan has, in the previous issue, we've seen him being tracked by these Canadian security agency spooks. What happens here is they interrupt him as he's trying to start up his car. I like the way that Windsor-Smith renders Logan turning his head up towards them, and then he's hit with this tranquilizer dart. And I like the way that Windsor-Smith renders these security goons as pretty much anonymous with their sunglasses on in the middle of the night. They look fairly anonymous in their visual presentation. And then we switch to this panel at the bottom of the page where Wolverine has been prepped for this medical experimentation procedure, which we shall see is his body's pumped full of the adamantium compound. So we have here some dialogue in these captions between, as it turns out, 2 technicians. Who shaved the patient? I did. What'd you use? Poultry shears? What? Look at the poor guy. Not exactly haute coiffure. That's really weird. I shaved him 20 minutes ago and he was as smooth as an 8-ball. Now this is interesting too, because this is Windsor-Smith indicating to Jim Novak where to place the lettering. He indicates that. And this is a Windsor-Smith lettering device where he will put the dialogue in a horseshoe shape, often around the image, central in the art or the panel, and it kind of violates a principle of reading comics, speech balloons and dialogue, where the natural direction is to read right to left and down the page, but instead he's sending us around the image of the plucked, sheared Logan here, who's filled with these tubes, and he's got these spikes coming out of his skull as well, because of course the adamantium is to be bonded with his organic skeleton. And the story, or this particular chapter, we have anachronic or out of chronological order storytelling, because we get these flashbacks to the night before and Logan being abducted by these security spooks. So he fights back. He's not actually knocked out by the dart, and of course they have no knowledge, as it turns out, of Logan's being a mutant. And of course Logan's primary mutant power is his accelerated healing factor. So they just think he's particularly tough, and also they note that he's real heavy for just a little guy, which is probably reference to the fact that Logan is in effect just pure muscle, really. So then it's the next morning and we have the arrival of the professor. And interesting too here with the coloring, that there is color coding for who is speaking in these dialogue captions. So orange for Dr. Abraham B. Cornelius, green for the professor, whose name we don't learn in the course of Weapon X, the story, and then ultimately pink here for the secretary, Hines, Carol Hines. So, good morning, Professor. Good morning, Dr. Cornelius. Are we set to begin? Tanks filling, sir, says Cornelius. A few minutes. How's the patient? Could be better. And again, we see that horseshoe disposition of the dialogue captions around Logan's head as the flotation tank is being filled with the fluid. And then we have the flashback to the night before as Logan's fighting back against his abduction. And here we have him being immersed in the flotation tank and the dialogue continuing. And at this point, the technicians start to speak. So the process begins on Dr. Cornelius's order. And then here is, through these tubes, feed, conductive feed, steady. Adamantium breakdown, 29-1, sir, says Hines, as she's monitoring the process on the computers. Feed, steady. It'll reduce, no problem. I'll compensate, okay. So this is another aspect of the storytelling design of Weapon X. It is only in the prologue and in the last chapter that we get Logan's own perspective on what's happening. In the middle chapters, we get simply the perspective and the dialogue of those who are doing this to him, of who are introducing the adamantium into his body and who are endeavoring to use him and turn him into a weapon, specifically Weapon X. So the feed is steady, and the suffusion enacting, according to one of the technicians, which is the suffusion of the adamantium throughout his body to lace and bond to his skeleton. And we're having the reading, the cardio tach has his heart rate higher than we expected. And this is a great sequence of panels here where he is on the bottom of the tank and then floats up into the tank. And then we have the flashback to the night before where the security guys are trying to pacify him, knock him out. This guy basically pistol whips him in the jaw, breaks his jaw, as we learn, and that's finally what does it for Logan. And interesting to see, you know, like his toughness in withstanding the procedure and his toughness here the night before being paralleled in terms of how tough it is to take him down. And that's one of the reasons that he's chosen subject for this, that he has proven himself to be tough. So let's get back to the images here. We have this upside down image of Logan here and here, which conveys the disorientation in the tank. He's unconscious, but the disorienting and othering view of Logan in the tank. So back to the dialogue caption, steady. Things are going well, doctor, I'm pleased, says the professor. Feed, suffusion, steady, both steady. So the feed into his body of the adamantium and the suffusion of the adamantium across his skeleton going steadily. This is an extraordinary experiment, Professor, says Cornelius. I'm honoured to be part of it. Of course you are, Cornelius. And Cornelius asks Hines, cardiotac rising, not good. I'd guess it's an ANS, and that is an autonomic nervous system kicking in. So the feed is steady still, so he ups the phenobarbital, 2 points, no, 1 point. Any more of that and he'll have beans for brains. So the phenobarbital is to stop him from fitting, from having a fit in the tank, but he's got to watch the levels. Is there cause for concern, asked the professor, who's overseeing the process but not directly involved. I don't think so, Professor, says Cornelius. You chose Logan for his remarkable stamina. We see that again intercut here with the flashback to the night before as the security spooks lift him into their waiting van. What we're getting here is his autonomic nervous system kicking in. He's a hard fella, even when unconscious. And then the chelation begin, but there's some problem. What was that? Resistance, sir. Compensate, resistance, maintain, equalize, feed, impeded, feed, backup channel, balance coming, feed, steady, cardiotac rising rapidly, feed, steady. So this isn't proving to be an easy process, and things are not going as they expected. So here we see Cornelius asking Hines to access Logan's medical profile and history on our computer. He says he studied it long enough, but there's something he could have missed. On screen, sir. So detail any cardio abnormality. None, sir. And then the professor says, you're really letting me down here, Cornelius. Why didn't you prepare for this in advance? And so the guys there, the technicians, are trying to continue the feed of the adamantium, but it's impeded. Equalize. I thought I'd prepared for everything, Professor, but who could foresee this? Feed, steady, feed. It seems that Logan's highly accelerated heart rate is draining the adamantium reservoir at a rate of, Hines, 53 in 1, sir. The rate should be 24 in 1. I couldn't program for that, Professor. Actually, it really doesn't seem credible. Look at the art on these pages. Look at the spread. Barry Windsor-Smith's anatomical command is unsurpassed. Tremendous. The angles he is representing Logan at in the tank. Really just incredible work. A tremendous draftsman. And then we get a point of view from the tank looking out at the professor and Cornelius in this vertical panel. The professor says to Cornelius, but I can assure you, there'll be no further problems, Professor. Feed, steady, feed. You see, Logan's heart rate can't possibly go any higher or he'd be impeded. Superman or something, he says more quietly. Equalize, he orders. We're passing the equalization point, sir. We'll have to compensate on every channel. So that is the pumping and the suffusion of the adamantium in his body. Astonishing. Refeed then on all channels. So these are the channels into his body, the tubes. What's causing this, doctor? Asked the professor. Your guess, Professor. We've enough thorazine in Logan to drop a bullock. That's what's keeping him unconscious and sedated. So the problem is obviously more than auto nervous system or a cast iron constitution. So they're feeding the compound in, the adamantium. They're maintaining it. Doctor, I have some interesting data for you, says Hines. Yes, Miss Hines. According to Medfax, Mr. Logan has been shot at least 5 times and survived each attack. 4 to the trunk, once in the leg. Tough geezer, says Cornelius. We know this, Hines. But the bioscans show nothing in epidermal nor internal scar tissue. So the professor there, Cornelius, didn't you say that Logan was hurt last night? Yes. Then where is his wounds? So here we see him in the tank and he's entered into this fetal position. And Cornelius asks Hines, do you have readings? I have a trace but no show. An hour ago he had a dislocated jaw, cuts, abrasions. Now there's nothing. On the board there's a definite linear equation between this phenomenon and the intense cardio activity. Maintain. And, well, I don't know how important this is, seems silly, but Mr. Logan's hair has almost entirely grown back in just 20 minutes. So here's Logan's hair back, growing back in the tank. So As Cornelius infers, we seem to be in the midst of something unprecedented. Our Mr. Logan is somewhat more than human, and indeed he is. Again, it almost goes without saying, but I must say it, tremendous art on these 2 pages. A wealth of detail, and you know, like, no scrimping on the backgrounds. The art is interesting, detailed, and we're getting this this sympathetic portrayal of Logan, despite the fact that he's unconscious as well, in the way that Windsor-Smith has chosen to render him in this kind of protective fetal position in the work, which is a subtle detail, I think, of Windsor-Smith's command of the body language here. So last page of this 8-page chapter, and we have the professor getting ready to walk out. Okay, I have to rethink this fast. If the patient's wounds are now healed, his heart rate could drop. Be prepared to de-escalate at a second's notice. That's plan 1. Plan 2, if the rate continues to rise, pump equivalent norepinephrine to its ratio, but keep me informed of all changes. So norepinephrine is a hormone. It's like adrenaline, and it raises blood pressure. So it's used in emergency situations. So Cornelius thinking here on how to deal with the plan. The fact that he's got a plan A and a plan B indicates that, you know, like, he's the strategist here in terms of the procedure. And the professor walks off. And interesting here to see Barry Windsor-Smith's use of silhouettes here. So the silhouettes are from the tubing in the tank, and they are cast over the back of the professor as he exits the room. Very interesting. So Cornelius says to Hines, is the adamantium reservoir sufficient for all of this? Sufficient at current rate, she says. Not good enough. Go to reserve. I'll need authorization from... You have it, madam. Go to reserve adamantium. Professor, I could use your advice on... And he turns his head and the professor's gone. So how'd you like that, he says. We're in the middle of a crisis, and he walks out. Feed, maintain. And that's it. So there's a crisis. Logan has been resisting the process. They've discovered that he's not a normal human being, and all of that is going to be picked up on in the next chapter. One last thing to note before I close the cover on this, and that is the rendition of Cornelius here. And it has been observed by others that Cornelius resembles somewhat John Byrne. And John Byrne, of course, a very important creator in respect of Wolverine and Logan's importance and popularity in the X-Men. And when Chris Claremont wasn't very interested in Wolverine at the beginning of his run on Uncanny X-Men, when John Byrne came aboard, because Byrne was Canadian, he made the case to develop Wolverine's role in the team, and was in that regard a fundamental driver of Wolverine's popularity ultimately. So interesting, and I wonder, is it just coincidence or deliberate on Windsor-Smith's part to render Cornelius somewhat like John Byrne in terms of his physical features and appearance? So there you go. I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on the second installment of the Weapon X serial. If you did like it, like the video on YouTube. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.